Thanks for joining us at Ride On Replicas, where we bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet. This review covers the re-released Fast and Furious version of the Revell 1969 Yenko Camaro in 125 scale, model kit number 85-4314. Revell has rated this as a skill level 5 for ages 14 above and suggests 7 hours of build time, mostly because it requires paint and glue and has some long decals. In the box, you get 107 parts molded in white, black vinyl tires, clear red, and clear with water slide decals. This is a single version kit with no extra parts to replicate the car that was seen in the movie. Overall dimensions are approximately length 7.5, width 2 3/4, and height 2 1/4 inches. Construction begins with the motor, but remember to follow the manufacturer's safety guidelines for any of the products that you see here, and unless stated differently, I used Tester's model cement in the tube and tested in enamel paints in the bottles. They were used for construction of the kit. First you assemble the engine halves together, then add the intake manifold on top. The left cylinder head is attached to the left side and the right cylinder head to the right side, and painted Tester's gloss orange. The transmission portion is painted Model Master gunmetal, and the left rocker cover is attached to the left cylinder and the right to the right cylinder head. Gather the engine parts shown here and paint the starter Tester's aluminum. The distributor and coil are Model Master flat black. The starter and the fuel pump are attached to the right engine half, and the carburetor top is attached to the carburetor bottom. Then the carburetor assembly, distributor, and coil are attached to the intake manifold. Paint the water pump orange and the oil filter a gloss white. The fan belt is flat black and the pulleys are detailed with some semi-gloss black. The fan is painted semi-gloss black also. The water pump is attached to the front of the engine assembly, and the oil filter is attached to the left side of the engine. Then the alternator and fan are attached to the fan belt. The fan belt assembly then is attached to the front of the engine assembly, and decal number 12 is applied to the oil filter. Assemble the header assemblies by adding the inner and outers for the left side and the right side together, and then paint those gunmetal. After that's dried, attach those to the respective cylinder heads on the engine. There's a copyright logo molded into the chassis above the fuel tank here, and you might want to use a fine hobby blade knife to remove that. And then there's a printed one, a decal on the at the base near the rear end of the car, and you can lightly sand that and paint right over it. Gather the parts for the front suspension and the chassis. Add the sway bar to the chassis and then the front suspension, and then assemble the cross member and the A-arms and the steering box. Then paint the whole thing a semi-gloss black. Install the engine assembly into the chassis on the motor mounts provided. Gather the parts to build the radiator and the attendant parts and paint those semi-gloss black except for the washer bottle. Leave that in a natural white. Attach the upper and lower radiator hoses along with the radiator, the battery, the hood latch, and the washer bottle to the radiator wall. And then the fan shroud is attached to the radiator wall over the radiator. Then assemble the radiator wall assembly into the chassis. Then move the upper and radiator hose to the intake manifold and lower radiator hose to the water pump and attach those in place. Pull out the exhaust pipes and paint those steel colored. To add a little flair, I also painted the glass packs and the baffles metallic blue like the car, and accented them with some gold stripes. Now attach the left exhaust to the right side, and then attach those to the headers and to the chassis assembly. Paint the rear axle and the left and right rear springs semi-gloss black, and the drive shaft steel. Then the left rear spring and the right rear spring are attached to the rear axle, and the drive shaft is attached to the rear axle also. Then the rear axle assembly is attached to the chassis. The other end of the drive shaft is inserted into the transmission. Now locate the shocks for the rear and paint those semi-gloss black. Now the left and right shocks are attached to the rear spring between that and the chassis. Gather the parts for the wheels and paint the inner wheels aluminum. Then install that into one of the tires each, and then add the outer wheels, the chrome parts, to the other side. Attach the wheels to the axle spindles, and now you have a rolling chassis assembly. Address the body by looking for any parting lines that need to be sanded off or any imperfections that need to be cleaned up, and then give it a real light sanding with a real fine sandpaper to provide some bite for your paint. If you're using a bright color, you might want to use a good primer here that's compatible with your finished paint, but then give your car a couple of mist coats with the color coat, and then finally some wet coats until you get a good gloss. After it's dried, then you can apply the decals, and I strongly suggest that you use some setting solution like microscales to help the decals conform to body contours and stick better. And then let that set aside to dry. Use the same technique to spray the body with a gloss clear coat to seal in the decals. After that has thoroughly dried, then turn the body over to add the windshield, the backlight, and the rear view mirror, and install those with Tester's Clear Part Cement or some white glue. Now find the tail lights and use the ones labeled part numbers 205 and 206. Using some white glue or clear Tester's model cement, install the tail lights into the appropriate sides in the rear, and then cap those with the chrome reflectors on the back side to add some reflectivity. Pull out the interior tub and the left and right sides along with the rear seat and paint those semi-gloss black. Detail any of the chrome fittings with some aluminum paint. Attach the interior side panels and the rear seat to the interior tub. Install decal number 8 to the interior side panels on each side. Locate the parts for the front seats, and you'll find that on the backs there's a little flash that'll need to be removed with a hobby knife. Glue the front seats to the seat backs and paint those semi-gloss black. Apply decal number 6, the Yenko emblem, to the headrests on the front seats in front, and then the shift lever is painted aluminum. The seats and the shift lever are then installed into the interior assembly, and the interior assembly has a light coat of Tester's clear gloss to seal in the decals. Pull these parts out to finish off the interior and paint them semi-gloss black. The steering column is detailed with Tester's aluminum, and decals 2, 3, 4, and 5 are applied to the dashboard for the instruments, etc. Then spray the dashboard with a light coat of clear to seal them in, and then decal number 1 is applied to the center of the steering wheel. And put a dab of clear gloss cement or paint on that to seal it in. The steering wheel is then attached to the column, and then the column assembly is attached to the dashboard. Finally, attach the dashboard assembly to the interior in the slots provided. Turn the body upside down and glue the interior into the body. Grab the parts to assemble the firewall, and then paint the firewall semi-gloss black with some flat black for emphasis. Then paint the brake booster Tester's gold and the master cylinder a gloss orange detailed with some aluminum. Then attach the brake booster to the firewall and attach the master cylinder to the brake booster. Then finally attach the firewall assembly into the body assembly. Gather the parts for the front end and paint the grille a steel color. Then use the chrome headlight reflectors and attach those to the grille. Then glue the headlights into those with some clear part cement or some white glue. Finally, the driving light nacelles should be painted silver, and then the driving lights should be attached with the clear glue or the white glue. To glue the body assembly onto the chassis, we're going to turn that over and install the engine section forward first, but make sure that you don't knock off the distributor or the coil because they're kind of sticking up there. So be careful and insert that into the body and then glue that into place. Now get these pieces out of the box and paint the front spoiler body color. Then attach the front spoiler, the bumper, and the license plates to the body assembly. At the rear of the car, the rear panel and the rear spoiler are painted body color as well. Then the rear panel is attached to the rear end of the body assembly, and the rear bumper and license plates are attached to the rear panel. The rear spoiler is attached to the trunk section, and finally decals 30 and 32 are applied to the rear spoiler. It's time to finish up with some of the small pieces and gather these parts and paint the air cleaner base flat black, and decals 14 and 10 are applied to the air cleaner. And then add a light spray of clear to keep them in place. And then the left and right radiator braces are painted semi-gloss black. And then the air cleaner is attached to the air cleaner's bottom, and then that assembly is attached to the carburetor. Then the right radiator brace is attached to the radiator wall on the right fender, and likewise with the left radiator brace on the left fender. Then decal 11 is applied to the fan shroud, and attach that chrome side mirror to the left door. Paint the hood and the intake shroud body color. After they've dried, add the Yenko emblem and the Yenko stripes to the top of the hood. On the underside of the hood, add the decals to simulate the insert sets there, and then also add the hood intake shroud in place underneath. Install the hood onto the body by squeezing the sides of the hood hinges inward a little bit, and then drop them into the fender wells for placement. No glue is needed. There are 4 decals left, number 43, to add to the center cap of each of the mag wheels. You'll notice that the hood fits real nice here. It's flush, but it wasn't like that to begin with. I actually ran into an interference problem with the hood intake shroud and the air cleaner. So I had to remove it for these photos, and I would suggest that you enlarge the opening a little bit in order to make sure that that doesn't interfere with the fit. So there you have it. This is a great looking kit when it's finished. Everything except for the hood interference I talked about fit perfectly. It practically fell together, and it looks gorgeous on the shelf. It's a faithful reproduction of the Fast and Furious Yenko, and if you want a great looking kit for your display shelf, this is one that you just have to have. In conclusion, I think you're going to love this model. It goes together well, and even though it's a level 5, I don't see any problems that an intermediate skill builder would have putting this together in flawless fashion. We hope you've liked this step-by-step how to build it review, and so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And you can find us on Facebook and at our website www.rideonreplicas.com. Thanks.